Hi everyone, and welcome to our new maker workshop. In this workshop, we are doing a member favorite. You guys have been requesting this one, so we thought we would deliver. This is a jumbo peony that you can put on your wall. Okay, Emily, you would have loved to have this in your room when you were a little girl.
Absolutely. I love the color. I love that they're 3D and take up space on the wall. I think these are just incredible.
They're great for an Easter party, a baby shower. I'm sure you can find a lot of places to use these gorgeous peonies, and they're very easy to make.
This would be a great craft to do with a newer crafter since they aren't super finicky and they look beautiful no matter what.
Just to give you all some perspective, here is the larger of the three, and then here is the smaller, and you can kind of vary the sizes by how you place them on the board, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's get started. In your kit, you'll get 2 packs of extra fine crepe paper. In the first one, there'll be 2 folds of coral, 1 fold of fern, and 1 fold of vanilla. Then there's a second pack that will have 4 folds of coral. You'll also see 20mm balls, and there's 24 count in the bag, 3 of these cardboard cake plates, and then there's a pattern that you can download and print, and it is actually 2 pages. The tools we'll be using are a pair of regular scissors, detail scissors, a hot glue gun. You can use low temperature if you'd like, and I also like to use these little clips. Then, according to the pattern, I've cut out some of these cardstock pieces. You can either cut them out by hand or on the cutting machine, as we've provided an SVG cut file just for this piece. So I've printed the pattern onto the cardstock, and I think it makes it really easy to go ahead and cut the pattern out. I won't be using any cutting machine for this flower, except, like I said, I did cut this out on the cutting machine. You can also cut them out by hand. These will not show, they're just more of a structure, but it was easy, so I cut them out on the machine. Then we have the rest of the petals and leaves. We'll do that second, but we'll start with the centers of our flowers. In this pack, you can make 3 flowers. So we have 2 of these corals for each of the flower. I'm going to set those aside right now, although we will be using a small piece. And then this will be for our center fringe, and this will be for our leaves and these little fern pieces. We're going to be using almost every single piece of this crepe paper, so try not to overcut, but we want 7 of these pieces, and I've layered 2 strips. And then you can just easily stack them on top of each other. So there is, that's actually 8. We'll have 1 extra. And I like to use the little clips.
Perfect place to use these.
Just clip on your pattern, and then you can, cut on one side, move your clip around, and then cut on the other. And as far as cutting these, the edges won't show, so just use the basic shape. And while you're cutting out those, I'll go ahead and cut my leaves out. This is kind of a funky trick that I'm going to show you of what I'm going to do to use as much of this crepe paper as possible. So I'm not unrolling this. This is how we're going to cut all of our petals and leaves. I'll put the pattern right on the edge, and you can see the pattern says fold. Then I'll use my larger scissors. I'm going to cut from one corner to the other for now, just to make it easier. And use the pattern as the base. You can cut it as large as the paper will allow, because we'll use all of that crepe paper. There's some scraps. And then I'll do the same thing on this side. I don't need that half one.
I'll use that for my last piece.
There we go. If you want to, you can cut your leaves first and then just use the scraps.
That would be a good idea.
That makes sense, because you do want to use as much as possible. So you can see I have extra crepe paper here. I'm not going to cut that off. I'm actually going to just use the shape of the template, and I'm cutting through the whole stack at once. You'll see how it makes it a little crinkly on the edge, but by the time we stretch it out, it will look really pretty.
Adds a little texture.
It does. So those are ready to go. So we have 7 pieces of these little ovals, and really make sure that you follow the grain so you can see the long side has the grain up and down. And then we'll stretch them Stretch them out just in the center. You don't want to stretch them all the way to the edge, maybe about like a dime size right in the center.
And you want these stretched out 100%.
100%. Yep. I want this crepe paper to lay as smooth as possible when we put it over our little spun balls. So I'll take a spun ball. The hole will go straight down, like right onto my finger. That hole we're going to use to put the little petal inside. Now I'm going to take my hot glue gun, put a dab of glue right on the long side here, and then I'll press it around to the back. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So this is the side that doesn't stretch.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Whole side down. And did you put glue on before you placed it? And then you just glue around it like
this? Yeah, just glue around it. And then I'll take the other sides and very gently, so I'm holding onto the top. I have my thumb over the hole here, the hole of the ball, and then I'll very gently just stretch it so that we get as smooth as possible. Obviously you're gonna get a bit of wrinkling, but you can make it pretty nice and smooth and even because these will show quite a bit. Place some glue on the back side, and then I'll just form that to the ball. The other thing you could do on this too, you could just paint them.
That's a good idea.
Right?
I do love the texture of crepe though.
I do. It's pretty to see the crepe on it.
And you said that this side's going to be towards the bottom.
Yes.
So if that side's a little ugly,
that's just fine. Yep. You just want the top side as smooth as possible. You could also use a marker if you don't want to use paint. I would recommend this pretty green color though. It looks so good. It's very springy.
Mine's not very smooth.
That's okay. You can just kind of press it down with your fingers.
Okay. We'll just put that one in the middle.
You could. Make it as, it's not going to be perfect. We will see some wrinkles. Just make it the best you can. See, mine has some wrinkles too.
I am glad I'm using the low temperature hot glue gun because this seems to be pretty hands-on. And my fingers are a little wimpy.
I think the low temperature hot glue gun, if you have maybe a tween or a child who's old enough to use the low temperature, this is such a good project for them. So the next thing we're going to do is take this cute little cardstock, and we'll start in the middle, put some glue on the back of one, and we'll place it right in the center.
Good opportunity to use your ugliest one.
None of them are ugly. They're all beautiful. And easy to follow. Just use the pattern and place one on each of the little petal pieces. And you'll place them nice and snug to the center. Also, it's important to make sure that all your holes, you can kind of see through, that they're all facing upward.
I think this is already looking super cute.
And we'll set that aside and let that cool. So the next piece is going to be all that fringe that goes around this cute little piece. And I have one fold of this vanilla, and here's my pattern piece. So I've made the pattern piece. You can cut 3 of these, and it says fold and fold. So that means you just take this piece, you place it on the end, you can line it up and clip it on. And I'll take my big scissors and we'll cut all the way through. So each flower will get 1 of these strips.
And that's 2 pieces in one?
No, I'll show you what we're going to do with this.
Okay.
So ignore the zigzags for now. Just go ahead and cut your 3 pieces. And since we already have 1 flower made, we only need 2 today. But I love how we're using up almost every single piece of crepe paper. There's not going to be any leftovers. So, all right, so we'll do the second one. And then I recommend once you take the pattern off that you go ahead and put clips back on the base. I would say 3-4 clips right on the base just to hold it all together. We are going to do some fringing, but we're doing it a little bit different.
When you say base, you're just saying one side. Pick a side.
One side. Pick a side, either side. It doesn't really matter. Okay, then you can see the little zigzags on the pattern, and this is just a guide. So we're doing a fringe, but we're doing a pointed fringe. So I'll start with cutting a bit off of the edge, and then I'm pointed, but we're going to do it at an angle. And if this is too thick, you can open it up and do half at a time. We are going to twist these, so my little scissors are sharper, so I'll go ahead and use those.
Oh,
and then
yeah.
see how I'm cutting out little triangle pieces?
And is this too thick?
Nope, that will be fine. You can do them a little thinner as you go because we will be twisting these. So don't do big, huge, because then you'll have less of the fringe. You'll make your angles very slight, similar to what I'm showing on the pattern. And you can see that I have about an inch at the base. See how I'm going straight down and then I'm just clipping the edge of this one to make the point again. So I'm not cutting all the way down twice. Does that make sense? So I cut all the way down and then I'll take and cut a point and then all the way down again and then cutting a point.
So it seems okay if these are pretty irregular.
They're going to be irregular and the cuts will not look perfect, and that's okay because we will twist every single one of these little strips.
That's a pretty good tip. That's saving my wrist a little trouble.
Yeah.
Just cut that point and then cut all the way down.
And if the cuts look a bit jagged, it's okay. The refinement comes when you do the twists. So if you're working on this project with a child, it's probably best that you do the cutting and then they can help you. Here's all my little scraps. You can take these little clips off and then they can help you do the twisting. So we'll open it up. If you want to, you can cut it into shorter strips. You don't have to work off of the whole. And I'll go through each and every one and just twist them with my fingers. I promise you, this is the most complicated part.
Didn't you show me a really clever way of doing this in bulk?
So here's a really quick way to twist these. So I'm folding this up, making sure the base is lined up until I get it into a clump like this. Then I'll run it between my fingers or my hands, roll it between my hands, compressing. That looks pretty good.
Yeah, I don't think that looks that bad.
Then I'm just going back and doing a little touch up. And I think the most important is to make sure that the tips are twisted. The tips are really pointed. It does go a lot faster.
Good time saver.
So rather than trying to glue all this behind this, we're going to use a fresh one.
Brilliant.
And then stack them. What I'm going to do is start to glue all of the fringe, and we're just going to do it on one, on one side like this. And as you move it around the circle, you overlap it and fold it just a bit. So I'll show you what I'm going to do here. So I'll just add some glue. You can either add the glue onto the cardstock, or you can also put it on to your fringe. And see how I'm kind of folding it as I go around?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to glue the whole thing on just like that.
And this is the advantage of the hotter temp hot glue gun, is you can work a little slower.
Right.
With the cool temp, you can only put a little bit of glue on at a time.
And move fast. Yep.
And you're just overlapping?
I'm
Once
just
you get all
overlapping.
the way to the end, just keep
Yep,
going?
just keep going. Yeah. Another way that I was doing it earlier is I'll just put a strip of glue onto my crepe and then move it around that way. So whatever feels more comfortable. And it's okay if it's not all complete, if you have little flaps up,
Yeah.
it will all be pressed onto the flower when we're done.
It looks like a little sea creature.
It does. It also looks like a teddy bear sunflower. You could also use a white glue to add these, but you might want to go a little bit slower and let it dry so that you don't get too much glue and then the crepe will break down.
And are you leaving this gap in the center
Yeah.
the whole time?
You can or not. I mean,
It's nature.
it will just make your fringe longer if it's not. I'm just basically covering where I didn't cut. The closer to the center you make it, then the less of a length you'll have, but either's fine. One of the things about using the hot glue gun for this is that you have to have fingers of steel.
That's why I like the low temp. A little less hot on your fingers.
That looks so pretty.
Like a sea anemone. I saved my best spiraled ones for last.
For the center, that's a clever idea.
And we're done.
And we're done. You beat me. You beat me to it. Okay. So then, yours does not have a hole, mine doesn't. It doesn't make any difference. The next thing we'll do though is add a bunch of glue on the back of our little center seed pods. I'm adding quite a bit, and then I'll press it in the middle and just really press it down and let that cool. Then I'll take my fingers and sort of fluff it up.
It's like eggs in a bird's nest.
It does. Perfect for Easter. You can take the whole thing, kind of press it up around. We have one more detail to add, but we'll do that at the end. So I'll set that aside. One for you. And if you want to have the outside, this going against the wall, you can use the white side. If not, you can use the brown. I'll go ahead and put that white side against the wall, so I'll flip it over. Now we have our last pieces to cut. I should have 2 of these for each flower. So I'm doing the same thing where I'm taking my pattern, kind of make sure it's all folded nicely, and we'll do this one at a time since I only cut out one pattern. And I'll clip it onto the edge. I'll use my big scissors for the long cuts. This is a really great way to cut out a lot of pieces at once, and I would not try to cut this on the Cricut or any sort of cutting machine.
Well, especially when you can just get it, do it in one cut with this extra fine crepe.
Yeah, and then I'll use my smaller scissors just to get some of these details.
And I like that this one's not so perfect. It can be a little bit.
It's a little roughly, and that's okay. We'll stretch that out a bit.
We'll just add to things.
So I'm saving this other piece because I'll use that, and then let me do this, cut this one, and I'll hand you the pattern. So for each flower, we'll want 16 of these petals, and some of them won't be quite the right size. Pull those out because we'll use that for something else. So there's 1, 2. This one has a bit of a cut on the side, but we might still be able to use that. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, so there's 8. We got 8 pieces from one, and I'll go ahead and cut this one for another 8 pieces. You can see there's a little bit of a cut on this one and this one. We'll go ahead and use those. I'll just trim it off. Same thing, and I will want to use the second half, so save this other half for the smaller petals. Really helps to have a nice sharp pair of scissors, and I think we've been using these scissors a lot. They're not as sharp. I can just cut these by hand, so you can go ahead and do that. So I have 16 complete large petals there. I have a few extras, which I'll use, and I'll just trim off the edge so it's nice and smooth. So now with this leftover piece, I'll place my smaller petal, clip that on, and I'll use as much, start from the top and just use as much as what is left over.
That is the perfect size.
And then use the small scissors to give it some detail. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If you have more than 16, that is fine. Use them all. Use every single piece that you have. I'll even use these as small ones because we have a full petal. So we have plenty of petals. We actually have more than 16 of the smaller ones, but I'll use every single one of them. So we'll stack those up and put them aside. So with your scrap pieces, go ahead and cut 7 of these for each flower. And I'm gonna let you do that.
Thank you.
And I love using the clips for them so you don't lose them, or you can just do it by hand.
Okay.
The last piece are these leaves, and since we are divvying them up between 3 flowers, I'll just go ahead and do that. So there's 15 leaves. I'll give you 3 large ones and 2 smaller. And just to kind of keep it even, I'll do 3 small ones and 2 large ones, and then the rest will be for the 3rd flower. So this flower, you know how we start in the center and we work out with most flowers? We're doing the opposite with the petals. So we're starting on the outside and working in, which means we start with our leaves. So I'm just gonna take the leaf and open it up, and then I'll just take the edge and sort of give it a nice ruffle. And you don't really need to stretch anything out. You're just stretching the edge just to give it some texture and ruffle. I'm going to give it a fold in the center so that now we have a bit of a backbone. Add some glue in between, and then I'm going to place it right on the edge. And since I have 5 leaves, these really won't show that much. They're just adding a bit of bulk. And they're peeking into the back. So I'm folding it, giving it a bit of a fold in the center. That gives it a bit more strength. And since I have 5, I'll just sort of space them out. So I'm adding a little bit of glue here, folding it over and then back out. That's an easy way to think about it.
And you're just going straight in?
Yeah, so I'm just gluing them right to the edge. You can always add these after if you wanted to tuck them in or behind, but might as well do them first. So we have this spiral wheel of 5. Flowers getting very large very quickly.
And it looks like you glued those pretty far from the center.
I did, I put them right on the edge. So now I have my stack of petals, and what I want to do is just kind of organize them. You might have some petals that are a lot smaller because of just how the paper was folded, and I'll keep those in a stack together. Those will be the last ones I put on. The smaller ones go towards the center. And at this point, if you've used 2 of these folds of crepe paper, you should have plenty of petals. This won't show, but you see how I've curved off the center of that larger one? Okay, so I have my tiny petals, my mediums, and then my large. And now I'll just start assembling. Give it a bit of a stretch in the center, just in the widest part, to give it a cup. And then we'll ruffle the top edge. Give it some shape.
And about how much are you stretching in the middle? Just
I would say about 1/3.
okay.
And in a broader way versus too confined. Now I'm making this little backbone by folding it onto itself. And you can see how the fold does help give it some strength. And since I have quite a few petals, I think I'll just work back and forth. So I'll do one on one side, you know, we'll make an X. We'll just start filling it in with as many petals as possible. As I'm adding the petals, I'm rotating them a little bit closer to the center so that they get a bit of a layered effect. And I like to have the leaves peeking out just a bit.
My favorite way to get ruffles is a little bit different than the way that you usually do it.
How's that?
Because I feel like when I just stretch it, sometimes I get little fingerprints. So I prefer to kind of bend it over my finger back and forth and move
That's a
along.
good idea. Yeah.
And then I don't end up getting as much tension points. It kind of gives a little bit more of an even ruffle.
That's really pretty. You'll notice that some of your petals are curling open. When we start layering, we'll open them up and then they'll be tucked behind another layer of petals. That will help keep them open. And we can also add a touch of glue. So right here, this is a perfect example. And just put a dot of glue there, and then I'll open it up and press it onto the petal side. You don't have to do this on everyone. You can even go back and do this later. I do a really big, you know, I hold the edges and just kind of stretch the center like that. So it's like a big stretch, a jumbo stretch.
Jumbo stretch.
Jumbo stretch for a jumbo peony.
And you could probably make these in a couple different sizes if you moved them a little closer in.
You could. If you start closer in, your end flower will be smaller. It's nice to have, when you have multiple flowers on the wall, to have different sizes.
Yeah, a little size variation.
A little variation, yeah. So I'm actually just going in and working through my petals, adding a little glue here and again, just to keep them nice and open. So definitely for my next layer, I am bringing it closer to the center so you can still see the petals behind. And I'm almost out of my large ones, so I'm going to switch to the medium size. One thing you could do too is just put glue on the back, and then when you place it down, you can just pinch it, and that will also give you a nice little ruffle and kind of a backbone. So these I'm going to put down first before I start adding little glue touches, because we do want to have them start folding upwards. If you do want to speed things up a bit, you can stack two and stretch them together, and then even stretch the edges two at a time, but glue one at a time onto the flower center.
And definitely a wonderful beginner's craft, since it has a wonderful result, but it's not super finicky.
It's not finicky, and you know, we weren't all that careful to cut them perfectly so they had perfect edges. The edges are pretty rough, but it looks beautiful.
It adds to the texture.
And same with, you know, the stretching. If you overstretch it, it will look great. If you understretch it, you can always stretch more, so there's just a lot of room for play and error and ad-libbing. I guess there's no errors, just playing. So at this point, I'm just looking for spots that I think could be a bit fuller, just for these final finishing petals. And I actually like how they sort of curl around just a bit on the edges. They get a bit tighter versus laying flat like the large ones. I think that it's a really nice effect. I love this! Okay, now I have all my little last bits, my smallest, and I'll just work on stretching and finding some cute places for those. These little tiny ones I'm not folding over, I'm just gluing the tip and placing them in a position that looks pretty good. Since they are smaller, I think the last one should go here. Okay, there's all my petals. The next thing is to take our centers, add quite a bit of glue on the back side, and then place it into the center. You want to make sure all your petals are laying flat so that they don't get bent over when you're placing this in the center. Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Okay, now we have our little tiny petals, and I'm going to give the top a bit of a stretch just because I don't want them to lay flat. I want them to have a bit of crinkle. Take your small scissors. You can also use your needle nose tweezers and just kind of poke a hole through the crepe paper so that you have a place to slide these. And then I'll put just a bit of glue in. You can also use the glue point to poke the hole. And then I'll slide this little tiny petal right into that hole.
You may get into a little tube, or do you leave them kind of flat?
No, I just leave them flat. However you want to do it. It's all about the details. And I like them to kind of curve and move so they're not just flat pieces of paper. So if it does tube up a bit, that's okay. If it rolls when you slide it in.
And does it matter which direction these are facing?
No, I like to make sure they're not all facing the same way, so kind of move them around a bit.
Okay.
Some facing each other, and you know, just to give it some variety. You could also use white glue if you wanted to. You don't have to use hot glue. It's pretty nice how they slide right into the holes. The holes are plenty big enough.
Perfect.
So I'm actually filling the hole with glue. That way the paper just slides right in. If you wanted to use a brighter color of pink for these centers, you can. If you have some on hand, but I do like this little matching color.
Cute.
Here we go. And here are two of our 3 jumbo peonies. These are actually larger, so you can make them smaller by starting at the center, or you can start all the way to the edge to make them large. You can see yours is a little bit smaller. This one's bigger, and then the one behind us is even smaller.
Perfect.
So 3 will make a really beautiful wall display, or if you're ambitious, you can make a dozen and cover a whole wall. Thank you for joining us for this maker workshop.
And we'll see you at the next one.